What's up everyone, and welcome back to Nexus. There are a lot of spooky stories out there, but something people are always taught to be wary of are curses. Nothing good can come from a curse, and while science might argue that magic or voodoo that causes them is bogus, there are still lots of stories of people ignoring the warnings and letting themselves in for a whole heap of trouble, probably because they were skeptical of the curses to begin with. Watch this video to find out the top 10 cursed objects science still can't explain. If you're new to the channel, be sure to subscribe to get new content similar to this every day. Also make sure to comment down below letting us know which number on this list was your favorite. And for this video, let's aim for that golden like button, which is 1,000 likes, so make sure to drop a like down below. Number 10. The Battle of Gettysburg of 1863 was one of the most famous battles in the entirety of the American Civil War, and is often described as a turning point in the war, along with being the location of Abraham Lincoln's famous Gettysburg Address. Today, the site of the battle is a national park and a place of historical significance, but people can't resist the urge to take small souvenirs back home with them, in the form of genuine Gettysburg Rocks. However, these rocks allegedly have a dark secret. They're cursed. For years, people have taken them and then returned them en masse, claiming that after taking them, their lives have fallen completely apart, with one man even having his wife and son walk out on him and then going to prison. On top of that, if you get caught, it's a $100 fine. So it's really not worth it. Number 9. Diamonds are a pretty astounding substance, one of the hardest minerals known to man, and they make drills out of this stuff, while they're also beautiful enough that they grace engagement rings and necklaces. But there's one particular diamond, a blue 45 karat diamond worth $250 million, which lots of people won't even touch. This is the Hope Diamond, and it's said to be cursed, after being removed from an idol in a temple in India by a thieving priest. For his crime, he suffered a slow and agonizing death. When it was dug up in the 17th century, the merchant who sold it to King Louis XIV of France was eaten alive by wild dogs. And then famously, Louis XIV and his wife Marie Antoinette were beheaded during the French Revolution. Everyone who has ever been in possession of this diamond has died in a gruesome way. Number 8. The pharaohs were some of the most powerful rulers in all of history, and were said to be the human form of Ra, the king of Egyptian gods, and so crossing a pharaoh would have dire consequences. But the archaeologists who unearthed the tomb of King Tutankhamun in 1922 didn't heed these warnings, and paid the ultimate price, falling victim to one of the world's famous curses, the Curse of the Pharaoh. But the truth behind the Curse of the Pharaoh could be a lot less sinister, as it's suspected that the archaeologists themselves thought up the story of a deadly curse in order to keep the presses at bay. In fact, while one of them did die a year after the tomb was opened, they lived an average to be 73 years old, most of them living into the 1980s. And that one who died, George Herbert, died of a mosquito-borne disease. Number 7. Moving over to Italy, we have the story of the Bassano Vase, a beautiful vase from the 1400s carved out of solid silver. It was allegedly made as a wedding gift to a bride in a northern Italian village, close to modern Napoli. But she died on her wedding night, clutching the vase to her chest and promising she would return and seek vengeance on whoever had killed her. It's not sure who this was, or even if this story is true, but legend has it that this vase was passed down through her family, and everyone who owned it died under mysterious circumstances. Eventually, a priest took it and hid it in secret, but it was rediscovered in 1988 along with a note reading, "Beware, this vase brings death." It was again passed around and all the owners died, with even museums refusing to take it. Today, it has again been buried in secret, hopefully never to be seen again. Number 6. James Dean was the king of cool at one point in history, up there with other greats of the period like Elvis Presley and Marlon Brando. But along with his acting career, he also had a passion for racing, and in September 1955 he traded in his Porsche 356 for a brand new silver Porsche 550 Spider, which he had fully customized, the number 130 painted on it, tartan seats put in it, and giving it the nickname Little Bastard. A week after he got the car, he died in a horrific car accident, coming after a spooky warning from none other than Alec Guinness, who you'll know most famously for playing Obi-Wan Kenobi in the original Star Wars movies. Guinness told Dean that the car was sinister and he'd be dead within a week, maybe using some Jedi mind tricks to see the future. After that, parts of the car were sold on, and they all injured or killed their owners in some way or another, including one incident where the wreckage was on display and the whole warehouse it was in burned to the ground, but the wreck was mysteriously unscathed. Number 5. The Crying Boy is one of the most sinister paintings you'll ever see. It's a creepy portrait part of a series done by artist Giovanni Bregolin in the 1950s, which all featured sobbing young children. Weird as they were, tens of thousands of copies were sold. But in 1985, a news story called Blazing Curse of the Crying Boy was published, describing married couple May and Ron Hall discussing how their home had burned down in a fire and everything was destroyed, except the copy of the crying boy. One firefighter even said that he had visited 15 homes all burned to the ground except for a copy of the painting. Even worse, it's also said to bring bad luck if you try to get rid of the picture too. So you literally can't win.
The painting had a hole in it from where the fire had touched it, but the flames hadn't spread.
But you'd have to say that fire's pretty much going out.
Martin Lowe was a man of science and not given to superstition. For him, the unvarnished truth might be in the varnish.
A bit surprised. I think it's probably been coated in something which is resisting the flames, whether it's actually some sort of fire retardant coating they put on the picture, or whether it's just some other coating which happens to have fire retardant properties.
Number 4. In the 19th century, the British Empire took over India, and they did it using brutal force and violence, heavily punishing the Indian people for fighting back. Of course, killing them wasn't enough. The British officers also had to steal, and one soldier named Colonel W. Ferris stole what he thought was a purple sapphire from a temple, named the Purple Delhi Sapphire. It wasn't a sapphire, it was just a gemstone. But when he brought it back to England, he suffered greatly, losing tons of money, and also everyone in his family got incredibly ill. Then when he lent the stone to one of his friends, the friend committed suicide. The next owner tried and failed to get rid of it after becoming convinced of the curse, even throwing it into a canal, but it was dredged up and returned to him. Finally, it was donated to the Natural History Museum, where you can still go and see it on display, nicknamed the Gem of Sorrow.
The interesting thing was Edward, he was not somebody who was prone first off to being into the world of paranormal or into supernatural items. His whole career was in academics. He was somebody who was a man of science, so he was not somebody who was easily prone into thinking bad luck equals cursed item.
Number 3. I once heard a story about a chair where every woman who sat in it mysteriously fell pregnant within a matter of weeks. But there's a much more eerie story of haunted chair than that one, in the form of Busby Stup chair, a chair where everyone who has ever sat in it has died. People are so scared of the curse that in the museum where it's now kept, it's suspended 5 feet off the ground just so that nobody can sit in it. The first person who died because of sitting in the chair was a man named Daniel Owedi, who was beaten to death by his son-in-law Thomas Busby after sitting in his favorite chair and threatening to take his daughter back to his farm to keep them apart. Busby was hanged for the murder of Owedi, but on the gallows he declared that anyone who sat in the chair would die a sudden and violent death, and to this day everyone has.
Busby was tried at York Court and was found guilty of murder. His punishment was execution by hanging, but before that he was granted his final request to eat his favourite meal at his favourite pub in his favourite chair. The pub was called the Coaching Inn, and seconds after he had eaten his meal, Thomas Busby stood up and shouted, "Anyone who ever dares sit in this chair will be condemned to suffering and death," to which Busby was promptly taken away and executed.
Number 2. One of the most astounding archaeological discoveries of recent years has been the discovery of the enormous Terracotta Army in China, a 2,200 force of statues said to guard the emperor in his afterlife and protect the tomb. It was first discovered by farmers who lived in the area when they were digging a well, but the army has apparently cursed them for disturbing the place. One of the group, named Wang Puzi, committed suicide in his home when his family were away to avoid being killed by the terrible disease which afflicted him and having no money to pay for medicine. And 2 of the youngest died jobless, poor and young. Today, the remaining members are paid to sit in souvenir shops near the mausoleum signing books. It all began when they accidentally knocked off the heads of one of the warriors.
With over 8,000 soldiers and 600 horses depicting the armies of Qin Shi Huang, the first emperor of a unified China. But for the locals who first discovered the statues, the Terracotta Army has brought them nothing but despair in 1974.
Number 1. Mountains are notoriously dangerous places, and lots of people meet grisly ends on their slopes. So when German tourists in the Otzi Alps found a corpse face down in the snow in 1991, they thought it was another mountaineer who met a sad and untimely end. But the truth is much weirder, because that corpse was actually the 3,000-year-old body of a murdered man, known as Otzi. But it turned out that Otzi was cursed, bringing death in his wake. The first person to fall victim to the curse was a forensic pathologist who touched the body with bare skin. dying shortly afterwards in a suspicious car accident. Things got weirder when they realized Otzi had been murdered, shot in the back with an arrow, and then castrated by his killer. Most eerily of all, Helmut Simon, one of the tourists who first discovered the body, died 13 years later in 2004 after falling 300 feet in an Austrian ravine.
Otzi seemed to bring death wherever he went. One of the German tourists who found Otzi died not too long after by a freak blizzard. The leader of the Otzi forensic team died in a car crash while on his way to give a lecture about Otzi. The man who filmed Otzi's removal from the ice died by a brain tumor. Now, it didn't take too long for people to realize that this 4,000-year-old mummy was cursed.
That was our list of the top 10 cursed objects science still can't explain. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to hit subscribe so you never miss a video in the future, and hit the like button too so we hit the golden like of 1,000. Thanks for watching, guys. Peace!